Hello and welcome to this section. In this section, we will learn the common development process in HeCode. In this section, I will demonstrate a complete project development process. If you have some difficulty in following, you can see my operation first. Because when we finish all the basic courses, you will find that what I demonstrate in this section is actually a Hello World general application in HeCode. Of course, I would like you to follow me, and I will slow down my operation steps so that we can know more about the common operations in our HeCode. Even if we don't know it, it doesn't matter, because as we learn deeply, you will understand the principle of all operations and realize the fun of programming. One of the functions we realize is not only one method, we can find the most convenient way to remember and use and master it. Okay, let's start this section. For our development process, it is mainly divided into the following 4 steps. The first step is to select one suitable development environment, then make the main body, and cooperate with our project preview. If we find that the whole project has no problem at all, then we will launch another project. First, let's choose a development environment. Let's open the editor and log into our editor directly hecoda.com. With such an address, we can open our online editor. In this demonstration case, we are going to make a system of form collection. For such a system, we first ask ourselves whether we want to make a small program. In such an environment, we don't need to make a small program, so we exclude the native small program of WeChat, and then the system we are going to make is not a small game, so get rid of such a little game. So in the end, we choose a type of web applet for development. There is no problem in choosing relative positioning or positioning. In order to facilitate our demonstration, we choose absolute positioning here for our development environment, and then we change the application name to HelloX and click Create, so we complete the first step of development environment selection. Then we will complete the second step of the main body logic production, and the main body production includes the following 4 steps, respectively: our object addition, widget layout, database service design, and our event addition. So first, let's do the first thing, which is to add our objects. First of all, we add a page under the front end. The name of this page is called the enrollment page. For the method of renaming widget in the number of our objects, we double-click to rename it, or you can right-click to select the option of renaming from the drop-down menu here. We change such a page into an enrollment page, and then we change it into an enrollment page, add an input box under the registration page, which is such an input box. We can find that when we click the input box, he does not immediately add such an input box in our stage, but turns our mouse into a cross. What does the cross mean? Yes, let's do a drawing operation. So we draw an input box at a position where we want an input box to appear, and then let go. You can find that when we draw an area, an input box appears. Then we pull the same input box down, and we add an input box below. At this time, you will feel a little ugly. You see, the size of such a mullion above is obviously inconsistent with that of such a mullion below us. What should we do? In fact, it is very simple. We can check our first input box first, and we can find that its property is x64, then its width is 239, and its height is 53. We can fill such a property in the new input box, so as to ensure that the size of the two is consistent. Let's change its property, x is 64, then width is 239, then height is 53, so the two input boxes are exactly the same size. But a classmate asked me, do I need so much trouble? Why do I have to add another input box and adjust its property? Can we also add such a box by copying or pasting? Yes, it's also possible. Let's delete the input box we just adjusted. We select the input box that we have just set the property. We click a copy button, and then select its parent container, which is our enrollment page. Then click Paste to find that another input box has been pasted. However, we haven't found any changes in the UI. Why hasn't there been any changes? This is because our two input boxes overlap. We can select an input box in the object book, and then long press a down key on the keyboard. You see, we can set one of its y-axes. Then, in addition to the right-click copy and paste, you can directly click and select a widget, then use the keyboard's Ctrl+C and select its abdominal muscle to make a Ctrl+V, and then make a paste. Here, you must pay attention to one thing. When we paste, I selected one of its parents, that is, the paste on our registration page. I didn't paste directly in our input box. Why? That's because if I choose to paste here, it's equivalent to I want to paste an input box in the input box. Obviously, an input box can't be added in the input box. It can only be added under the page. Therefore, when we want to paste, I can't select a paste effect here. You see, clicking paste here won't have any effect. Yes, if I click a paste effect under the registration page, you will see a new input box, and then similarly, we add a button below. Okay, in this way, we have completed the addition of a basic object. Since we are now in an absolute positioning environment, in fact, the layout at the beginning is pretty, but we can also modify it a little more refined. Here we need to set a series of styles of widget by setting the property method. For example, for such an input box and such an input box, I want to uniformly modify its size and a color of its border. How do I operate? We can first select an input box in the object book, and then click Ctrl to make a multiple selection. In this way, I will select two input boxes at the same time, and then I will uniformly adjust its width and height. For example, I will uniformly adjust its width to 240 pixels, and then I will modify its height to 40 pixels, so you see this completes a method of batch setting the same two input boxes. In the same way, we can also modify a style of a button like ours. The button looks too big. We change it a little bit smaller. Let it set to a 135 pixel image. We can find that it is not in a middle position at present. We hope it is in a middle position. Then we can adjust an x-axis property of it. Since the width of our entire frontend is 375 by default, and such a button occupies one of the 135 widths, it is said that it has a width of 240 left. If I want it to be in the middle, its x should be set to 120 pixels. In this way, we should also set its height to 40 pixels, and then change its font size to a smaller size, such as a 15 font size, and then modify its button text to become a registration. Similarly, we can also adjust its background color, and then the border fillet. If you don't think it looks good, you can also have a border fillet next time. Set it slightly smaller. I'll set it to an 8 pixel A, which is a basic page for registration. Then we also modify the content prompted here, which is called Please Enter Content. We change the name here to Please Enter Name, and then there is a Please Enter Content here. We change its Please Enter Content to Please Enter Contact Information, and then we change the input type on the lower side to his mobile phone, so if it is not a mobile phone type format, it will automatically help us to do such a detection, so that we can do a basic layout, and then we can go to the next step of database service and design. You can see when I click such a registration button, I hope to submit the name entered by the user and his contact information to a number of my backend according to the database. First of all, I need to add such a database in the backend. Here we select the backend, click the left side, and there is a private database. For such a widget, we click it, and then change its modified name to a user table. We need to submit two fields of the user's name and contact information in total, so I am selecting such a database. In the case of a database, first add a name field, and then add a contact information field. You can see that through one of my click mode, the two fields are added. Then I will design the service. The so-called service is a hub connecting the front and the back end. Here we will open a separate chapter to explain, so you just need to follow me now, without understanding a very profound principle. The so-called service is a hub connecting the front and the back of the service. We changed the name to submit user information. The so-called receiving parameter is the parameter it gets from the front end. For an application like ours, it needs to get the user input name and contact information from the front end. Therefore, there are at least two fields, one is our name and the other is our contact information. The so-called return parameter is a series of parameters that we need to return to the front end after completing such a series of service definitions. After completing a submit operation here, we can return to the front-end a prompt whether it is successful or not. Then, when such a submission service starts, we select one of our databases and let it perform a submission operation. Then his name corresponds to the name of the parameter we received from the front-end, that is, select a name from the drop-down menu here, and his contact information is also selected from the drop-down menu. Then when it is selected, we click the callback here, because it is an asynchronous operation. When the current service is completed, we will set whether the result submitted is successful or not, so that we can return the result submitted to the front end. In this way, you don't know that all the operations have nothing to do with it, because we will have a special chapter to explain the design of our backend database and service in the future. This is just to let you feel a design of our HYCODE development process. Then when we finish the design of database and service, we can make such a process of adding event. The so-called event addition is that we write in the logic. What do we think the logic is? Is it possible for users to click such an enrollment button after entering these names, and then submit its data to a database in the backend? So we add our event for such an enrollment button. We click such an event button in the upper right corner, and then there will be a trigger event. We choose when it is clicked waiting to perform an operation of submitting information. His name is equal to a content in the input box in our name, and its contact information. We still select a symbol of such a mouse, which is equal to a content of our submitted name. If you didn't turn on such a simulated mobile phone mode at the beginning, you can also turn on such a switch, so that it will simulate a contact information in your mobile phone. Here, we enter a name called Zhang San, and then his contact information is 138888888, and then click a registration. You see, he told us that it was successful. Then let's take a look at the contents in the database. You can see the name Zhang San and the contact information 1388 that we just filled in. He also submitted it, but we always feel as if there is something bad and something bad. You see, for example, I'll change 577 here, and then I'll click the registration. You see, he reminds me that I have successfully registered, and then let's switch the database. We also found that the data has been submitted. What's wrong? I believe you have found that the registration is successful. He didn't help us empty the content in an input box. What should we do? Let's make up the logic of this part. For example, after he has clicked and signed up, we click one of our input boxes to let him perform an operation to empty the content. Similarly, we can also select another input box to perform an operation to empty the content. In this way, such a set of logic will be done by clicking and selecting. Let's have a look again. Here we have another board called LC, and then the same 13588888888, and then click a registration. You see, he told me that the registration was successful and helped us clear all such names and contact information. Let's check the database again. You see, a piece of data like LC we just filled in has also been filled in, so we have completed a complete development process of a project. Now let's recall our complete development process. First of all, we will choose an appropriate development environment. Generally speaking, if you don't need to develop small games or small programs, you can choose the first development environment, that is, our default web applet environment, and then choose a layout environment according to your needs. For example, you need to match for positioning or absolute positioning, click Next time. Then in the second step, we will make a main body. The main body usually includes the addition of an object, a layout of widget, the design of our database service, and the addition of our event. In fact, there is no very clear sequence. You only need to make a design according to your own design pattern, and your own preferences. One design is okay. Generally speaking, we will cooperate with our project preview in the process of making the main body. If we find any problems in the project preview, for example, we found just now that when we click to sign up, his input box is not cleared, and we will go back to complete the production of a main body logic, continue to complement each other to complete such a step, and then finally we will complete the project build such an operation. As for the process of our project build, we will give you a detailed explanation in the next lesson. The above is the whole content of this section. Thank you for watching.